Hi, this is Joe Pitkin. I've made this video to explain to faculty and others the way that our outcomes assessment calendar works at Clark College. I'll start by saying that Clark does not have a one-size-fits-all model for outcomes assessment. We faculty do share some common requirements around outcomes assessment. For example, all full-time faculty are contractually obligated to conduct assessment work every year, and we are required to assess every program outcome for every degree and certificate that Clark offers on a regular basis, and that means at least once every 3 years. But having said that, different programs do have different assessment needs, and some programs may have good reason to revise the calendar I'm going to present. It's important, though, that faculty who want to revise this calendar for their own programs have a clear reason for doing so. In the past, some faculty have found themselves scrambling in the days just before graduation, or worse, they come in off contract in the summer quarter to conduct a rushed, low-quality outcomes assessment project just to meet an accreditation requirement. If that sounds like you, keep watching this video. Now, as many of you have heard me say before, accreditation is the dumbest reason for us to do outcomes assessment. It is a reason for us to do outcomes assessment. We do need to stay accredited so that we all keep our jobs. But it's important for us to ask ourselves why the accreditors require us to do outcomes assessment in the first place. The real reason to do outcomes assessment is to find out how well our students are learning, and then to refine our teaching practice in order to improve that learning. So with those goals in mind, I set up an assessment calendar back in 2015 that would allow faculty to assess all of our program outcomes in a reasonable time frame, giving us ample time to reflect on our assessment findings and to try new things in our teaching practices without burning people out in the process. And this timeline has been a real success for the transfer degrees, and many professional technical degree programs have started following this timeline as well. If you are new to Clark and you want to learn about the assessment schedule here, or if you're the head of a program wondering how you're going to fit in outcomes assessment with everything else that you have to do, take a look at the following calendar. So I've laid out the 4 quarters of the academic year here, and I'm representing this year as a circle because each academic year rolls over into the following one. And for each quarter, I'll lay out the work for the outcomes assessment team, that is the OA team. And that OA team is the outcomes assessment liaison, as well as support staff and administrators from the offices of instruction and of planning and effectiveness. And then I'll also lay out the outcomes assessment duties for faculty. Now, summer quarter is off contract time for faculty, so there are no faculty outcomes assessment duties scheduled for that quarter. But for the other 3 quarters, here's the way that an outcomes assessment project should be laid out. So let's start with spring quarter, and that may seem arbitrary, but it's actually a decent place to start. During spring, the OA team, and remember that's the outcomes assessment liaison, the Office of Instruction, and the Office of Planning and Effectiveness. They will be coordinating faculty participation for the upcoming fall quarter. So if you are faculty, you should expect to see messages in spring asking you what kind of assessment role you're going to play for the coming fall. And some of you may be scoring artifacts, others may be identifying benchmarks in student work, others may be coordinating your colleagues in an assessment project. Now, faculty in spring quarter will be asked to help gather student artifacts. And this can mean different things depending on what kinds of courses you teach. For some of you, this may mean allowing the outcomes assessment liaison to copy essays or projects that your students produce in one of your classes. For others, it may mean allowing the liaison to deliver a 20-minute questionnaire to the students in your classes. For those of you using embedded assessments, and that's really the common way of doing things in the professional and technical programs, you may simply be gathering data this quarter on how your students did on a particular assignment. So faculty are on break during summer quarter, so the only real outcomes assessment work going on in summer is done by the outcomes assessment liaison and the rest of the OA team. They'll be getting things ready for the coming assessment day, which happens early in fall quarter. To be exact, assessment day occurs on the Friday of week 3 of fall quarter. As many of you know, that's a statewide faculty workday, and I picked this day deliberately when we held the first assessment day in 2015. My logic was this. It's a faculty work day, so it's a contract day, but there are no classes being held that day. And it's the only faculty work day in the academic year that isn't adjacent to a holiday, or right before the beginning of the quarter, or right at the end of a finals week. I'd argue that the faculty work days right before and right after the quarter should be sacrosanct. Faculty need that time for course prep and for grading. But at the end of week 3, The quarter should be pretty well underway, and yet it should still be early enough that most of us are not truly swamped with grading yet. So for me, that faculty workday at the end of week 3 seemed like the natural time for faculty to do the so-called grunt work of assessment and to get that out of the way for the whole year so that we have the rest of the year to reflect on the assessment data we've gathered and to plan refinements to our teaching and curriculum. So what do we all do in fall quarter? Well, the OA liaison and the rest of the OA team will be analyzing data in fall quarter, but for faculty, the main job will be the assessment day at the end of week 3. That's when folks will assess those artifacts that people gathered the last spring. For those of you that use embedded assessments, assessment day is a perfect opportunity to analyze and reflect on the assessment data that you gathered in the previous spring and to plan some refinement to your teaching or to your curriculum that you can test out over the rest of the year. So finally, we get to winter quarter. And during this quarter, faculty should analyze and interpret the results of the assessment data that you scored last quarter. For those of you on the professional technical side of the house, winter is also the perfect quarter for you to make your assessment reports in the Outcomes Assessment Canvas site. Professional technical faculty, because programs tend to be smaller and run by just a few people, they're really in charge of reporting for their own program. On the transfer side of the house, we have dozens of faculty all serving one single program, and so usually the outcomes assessment liaison makes the report for the AA degree. But that outcomes assessment Canvas site, that's where you're going to report on what you found in your last assessment, what refinement to your teaching practice or to your curriculum you're going to try out, and when you're going to run the assessment again to see whether your refinement is effective. The OA team's job is to help faculty to interpret the assessment data as well as to share out that data with the whole campus. So that's it. If you look at the entire calendar at once, it might look a little overwhelming, but notice that nobody has very much assessment work to do at any one time. One of my first goals when I came onto the assessment liaison position was to try and make faculty's assessment workload more equitable, where everybody contributes some effort towards assessment and nobody is stuck spending dozens of hours per year on assessment. Many of you have heard me say before about assessment that nobody should be spending more than 6 hours per year on the grunt work of gathering artifacts and scoring them and reporting on them. Now you may spend more time than that. In fact, probably you should spend more time on that than that, reflecting on what the data mean and reflecting on what you're going to do about it in your teaching practice. But as far as the grunt work is concerned, if you're spending more than 6 hours a year, collecting artifacts and scoring them, then something's wrong, and we should look together at ways of streamlining your process. So thanks for listening. And if I can give you any help making sense of this calendar and what the assessment expectations are for faculty, please give me a call or send me an email. I'm eager to talk with you.